All right, y'all. This is going to be sort of part two of the vest series of patterns. As I said in the last one, I did an Instagram poll about what type of uh, vest shape y'all would want to see happen in my next pattern. And it was pretty split between a classic shape and a more close to the neck haltery shape. So last one was the classic shape, and now we're going to do a try on and full exploration of the more haltery close to the neck version. So let me put it on. Okay, now I have it on. This is called the summer tank, and again, it does have that haltery close to the neck dropped underarm, which I'll show you in a second, look. It is, as a general overview, it's knit in brioche from the top down, and this one is knit in cotton. Now, I want to tell you about the cotton because I know that cotton can be a sort of polarizing, if not off-putting in general, type of fiber for the knitting community, but I want to first of all agree that I also don't usually enjoy knitting in cotton, and then secondly next tell you that this was an absolute pleasure to knit in the yarn that I knitted in. So I thought I was gonna go twirl for you, but first let's just talk about the yarn. So this yarn base is by a New York indie dyer named Amanda Who, and the company's called Who Made, and this is the base that is called Watercolor DK, and she makes all of this yarn in really small batches, which means this is a great project for it because you only need 3, 4, or 5 skeins, which is exactly what she produces in any given lot. So you're kind of like getting your own custom yarn when you order from her. So that's a big plug. Let's talk about cotton knitting. When you knit cotton, it's like stiff and it doesn't stretch over the needles as nicely as wool does. And it can be kind of slippery and stiff. And this yarn isn't like that. It first of all has a sort of like vintage t-shirt feel, which in the fashion industry, I would call that like a combed cotton. So not a shiny, thready cotton. It's more of a vintage worn t-shirt feel, very soft. And this yarn has all sorts of little flecks. I'm going to zoom in. All sorts of beautiful little flecks throughout it that make it an absolute pleasure when you're knitting because it's sort of thrilling to like see that little orange blip come up. Or in the case of this yarn, wait, I'm going to lift up my shirt. Hold on, I'm not very technically inclined. There's even little, I'm backwards. There's even little like blue blips in it. Can you see that? Right there. So you come across the little blips of dye and it's very satisfying to knit. And secondly, this stitch, which is brioche, is sort of the perfect stitch for cotton. And the reason is it's already sort of like an open, airy stitch, which means that you don't have to deal with it being too stiff or harder to knit. The other thing about this yarn, now I'm going to twirl. The other thing about this yarn is that it is sort of knit in this open stitch, which means, can you see that I'm wearing that tank beneath it? You cannot see through it, through the knit structure, but it is super light and airy. Like I feel the air coming through, which means I don't need to wear anything below it, and I won't have the creeps gaze upon me, which is something that I personally don't like. Like any sort of nipple showing through a garment is something that I feel uncomfortable with. So this garment, while you can wear a tank under it, also is great on a very hot day because it's like the air comes right through, but no creeps are viewing anything. So now, quickly to get into the details, this garment is knit from the top down, and you sort of begin with the shoulder and knit the back. And then you begin growing on the front. And for that section, you're knitting brioche flat, which the technique is sort of different than knitting brioche in the round, which makes this a really good learning experience because when you get to the underarm, you then start knitting brioche in the round. So you knit flat, you knit in the round, and then finally you have your folded rib trim at the neckline, and then a little grown on, it's just jersey, but it provides this little curled edge that I think is really satisfying and beautiful. So it's like really pretty finishing. So I'm gonna turn so you can see it. It's slightly A-line just because my hips are, my body's a little A-line, but it's actually just straight from the underarm down. Here, maybe this is a good view of it flat. One thing that's really gorgelina about brioche is that the shaping, can you see that? The shaping like buds off of each other, and it's so beautiful the way it happens. And it's also easy, like it's a totally learnable, easy technique, but it's very satisfying. Like, let's zoom in. Look at the way that the neck shaping just like splits off. So cool. One thing I want to point out about this pattern is as you're knitting, it's going to look really long. And that's just sort of the natural wants and wishes of one brioche, but also cotton. When you block it, and also when you add on the trim or the little rolled edge, it really sort of becomes its final form. So I know some of you don't like to block, but I hope that I can convince you that blocking is like the most wonderful thing because it's when the garment comes alive. So block this piece, and also as you're knitting, if it looks like the armhole's really deep, don't worry, it's all going to come together when you add the trim on and then block it. Okay, let's talk about sizing. So I have a spec page within the pattern. The pattern is on Ravelry. The pattern's also on my website. And my goal with any pattern is that as many bodies and people can fit into it as possible. Whether or not the garment expresses your gender or your style is totally up to you, but I hope that as many bodies as possible can fit well into this garment. So, for example, I don't really have boobs, but this garment works well if you do. This is me simulating boobs. Because it has sort of a dropped armhole and because the brioche sort of expands to allow for different bodies. If you do not feel like the spec page will work for your body because it's either too big or too small for you, then I will happily grade up or down for you because it's sort of the most important thing to me that my garments will work for you. And I just, I want everyone to be able to enjoy my work and also your work because you're knitting it. So I am happy to grade. Just hit me up and I'm happy to do that. So let me give you one last twirl. And there she is. This is the summer tank. Again, it features Who Made watercolor DK yarn. and it's available on Ravelry and my website. So if you look down there, I'll include as many details as possible about things I covered in this video, and I hope you'll knit it.